let's make a start. Cedric, please feel free to join the front row. Everybody's shy of the front row. This we know. This we know. Those on the front row are the ones that did it at school. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to COP29, firstly. Welcome to those that are joining on live stream. Welcome to those that are joining in the future, because we're recording all our events and you can find them on the GCCA website. But of course, welcome to our audience who have joined us in our Concrete Future Pavilion for our first event of COP29, Advancing CCUS in the Cement Sector and the Industrial Scale Rollout and Policy Enablers. There is a seat at the front if you want to quickly join. I'm Paul Adelecki. I'm the Strategy, Communications and Policy Director for the GCCA, and it's my great pleasure to be your MC for today. Cement and concrete, as we know, are vital, essential for the modern world and for many of the challenges that our planet faces. We do know, though, that there is a CO2 challenge in the manufacture of cement, and that is why our members in the GCCA are committed to a net zero future. We have a roadmap which we produced in 2021, the first global industry really to have an effective and credible pathway to how we will get to net zero. And it's no secret that CCUS is our largest lever within how we can achieve net zero cement and concrete into the future. So we're really here to talk about CCUS, advancing CCUS, the progress that our sector is making, but also the challenges that we have. Some of the challenges are all around policy enabling and financing the transition, and we, the GCCA, are here at COP indeed to talk about that, to talk with as many governments as possible to help us deliver the enabling policy which will help us accelerate on our mission. Now, the GCCA, for those that don't know, is the voice of the sector, committed to a net zero future. We represent around 80% of cement production outside of China, as well as a number of key China players. So we're delighted to have the backing of all our members. We're delighted for the sponsors of our pavilion. Let's get moving, though, because you're not here to listen to me. So my first speaker is Jared Daniels. He's the Chief Executive of the Global CCS Institute. We're delighted to collaborate with the GCCA, oh my God, the Global CCS Institute on a number of key pieces of work. Jared joined the GCCSI a number of years ago, but has 20 years in terms of leadership and clean energy, collaborating with industry, business, nations, and a number of different NGOs. Jared, can you kick us off, please?
Well, thank you very much, and thank all of you for joining us here today in terms of the conversation of where does CCS, carbon capture and storage, or more broadly carbon management, fit in for the cement industry, but take a step back, fit in broadly. Right, so to get from where we are today as humankind to net zero and sustainability, we need all forms of climate change mitigation, as much energy efficiency, as much renewables, as much nuclear, as much of many things, including gigatons of carbon management, both carbon capture and storage from point sources, industrial point sources, like from the cement industry, the steel industry, the power sector, and gigatons of carbon dioxide removal, the net negative to pull CO2 down out of the atmosphere. All of this is required to get to net zero. And so today's conversation is specifically applied to CCS in the cement sector, but again, just to set the stage broadly, we need gigatons of carbon management broadly across a number of sectors, right? The key to our success in all of these endeavors is collaboration on all forms of climate change mitigation. And I think today in the discussion, we'll talk about the collaboration that already exists for carbon capture and storage, and the collaboration and good work that's being done within the cement industry as well. Right? From my view, as you know, where I sit with the Global CCS Institute, the outlook is positive in terms of the progress and the motion that we see. There is still a long way to go. Nope. There we go. That's even better. There is still clearly a long way to go, but we'll try the mic. but we are well on our way. There are challenges to overcome, but many people around the world in various industries are working on this, and we can get into that later as well. So just to give you some numbers, there's roughly 50 carbon capture and storage integrated facilities and plants that are operating wonderfully well around the world. There are another 44 plants that are currently past positive financial investment decision and in various forms of construction, and those will act. Forget the for our. We will go again. No, that'll work. Anyhow, hopefully this works, but there are a number of projects in operation. There's another 44 projects that are positive FID and under various stages of construction, which will double the amount of carbon capture that we have up and operating soon. So that is a very positive story. You can just rough numbers, 50 million ton per annum of capture that already exists, another 51 million ton per annum of projects that are now in construction. And so that's just where the state of the broad carbon capture and storage industry is at. When we look at the project pipeline, you can see one of the strengths of carbon capture and storage is its flexibility to be applied to many aspects of society that we need to decarbonize. And you can see just historically, it was on gas processing, it was on a number of processes in the North American context over the years. Problems here, 50 years ago, but as we move forward, we are seeing a growth in the number of applications for CCS, and we'll get into talking about how can it be applied and utilized in the cement industry. And so there's a number of platforms that already exist, many mechanisms that many of you are familiar with, the Clean Energy Ministerial, Mission Innovation, a lot of ways that we can collaborate. This clearly needs to have strong government leadership for policies and regulations. This needs to have industries to step up to build, own, and operate this. This needs to have partnerships with academia to continue to advance technologies and develop the next generation of practitioners across all aspects of what's needed to stand up large industrial projects, right? We are all in this together. There are many collaboration platforms that already exist and that are being expanded upon, and again, much good collaboration led by GCCA in the cement industry in specific. And so hopefully maybe that just sets the scene, gives you the broad perspective of where CCS fits in. Again, absolutely critical alongside everything else we need to do as society to reach net zero. Thank you.
Fantastic, Gerard. And you'll hear from him later when he joins the panel. Forgive us for some of the technical gremlins. It's our first event. Hopefully we will sort those out as we go through the week. But I think you can all hear me now. I hope you can online as well. So my next speaker is the CEO of the GCCA, Thomas Guillot. Thomas joined from Holcim, has 20 years experience in sustainability, and I have the privilege of working with him on hearing his passion and leadership on our net zero mission every day. Thomas, over to you. Come stand here.
You have a pay raise. Thank you. Oh no, the budget is. Sorry, we're looking for donors. Okay, thanks, Gerard, for talking on CCUS. And indeed, for me, the experience we have with you as an organization and all the work we're doing on CCUS is really remarkable. And I want to illustrate that with some of the progress we've made in cement. But I have to say that with the work we've been doing and also with the same CCUS and all the collaboration, I think it's really one of the ways, we say sometimes, what are we doing at COP? Why are we here for? And I think this is for me one of the examples that works collaboration that we've been working on. We meet in every now and then in these events, and that's a clear success. So what is it on the Paul has actually introduced the roadmap, right? So I mean, we have published in 2021 this roadmap. And you see there in purple, I mean, that was the quantity of CCUS we believe we will need. So we have defined 7 decarbonisation levels, right? Which are technologies that are available to decarbonize the cement and concrete sector. So it was a full value chain approach. We actually start by looking at construction. So how do we build? How do we use the material? And then across the value chain, understand how you can optimize the formulation, how you can optimize the different ingredients to actually decarbonize along the value chain and make it happen by 2050. So we are very convinced that this is feasible with the actual technologies that we have, including CCUS in its current state. However, we are very convinced and we know very well that innovation will help us doing faster, doing it more efficient, and certainly doing it also cheaper. Especially when we talk about CCUS, we know the cost on the progress that we have ahead. So GCCA has published this, and this was the commitment of the CEOs from our industry. So GCCA is a CEO-led organization, meaning that our members are basically the top bosses of all these organizations that are actually involved. On that makes a commitment, right? I mean, these are the big boss saying it. It's not just a matter of talking. Now, we also work with what we call the national partners. So it's the National Cement Association across the world. And with them, we have actually said that having a global roadmap is nice. It's a good exercise, but it's not sufficient. What we need also is to make sure that in every geography of the world, and certainly the one that matters most, we understand how you can actually implement the 7 levels, on how you can appropriate yourself the different technologies in the respective geographies. And we've been running around the world, and you see in green the areas where we have done the exercise first, understanding and applying the 7 levels, and going through a local an exercise to see what can be done locally, what can be done with circularity, what can be done with product, decarbonized product, etc., including CCUS. How do we work with CCUS? And with that, understanding also what we need to do in terms of regulatory transformation, in terms of support, etc. In many cases, in each of these levels, it's not just a question of what is the cement industry doing. It's really a question of how do you work in an ecosystem to make progress. And in the case of CCUS, we need to carbon capture, that's one step, but we need also to have the carbon management value chain in place. So what do you do once you have captured the carbon? I mean, store it somewhere, pipe it, transport, whatever it is, etc. So you see in cement, you see in cement, so we have actually made a commitment for 2030. We said that we will have 10 plants running by 2030, full scale, industrial scale. We'll discuss what means industrial scale. And in total, we account for about, so 36% is about 1.3 million tons of carbon. So I used to say between 1.2 and 1.5 billion tons of capture. That's more or less what we need. And in the reference of the global CCUS target or demand or need by 2050, that's 5 billion or something in this area of magnitude. So it's 20% of the requirement. Now, why does cement need CCUS? And sometimes, you know, people say, but that's too easy. You want to do that, you have always extra. We've been looking at that thoroughly, but there is one thing that we should know is that there is 2 types of emission in cement. There is the emission from the fuel, from the energy that you need to actually raise the temperature of the kiln, and you have the energy from the chemical process. You have to understand that the cement plant is a chemical reactor in reality, and that the limestone reacts, and it's during that reaction that the CO2 is emitted. And this CO2 is unavoidable as long as you want to carbonate limestone. And this represents 2/3 of the emission from a kiln typically. So that's the reason why CCUS is needed. And we have been working with different technologies, and today we have probably around 7 to 10 technologies that are being tested around the world to actually see how we can capture. And you see some of these, I mean, name here, oxyfuel, laylac, calcium looping, etc. Some are actually capturing the CO2 at the end of the pipe, and some are capturing the CO2 in the course of the process. And this can be combined actually with some of the activity. I mean, there is a lot of biomass in the system. I mean, the cement plant are developing, particularly in relation to circularity of waste, repurposing waste into the cement kiln. There is a lot of biomass, and therefore there is the possibility also to consider the potential benefit of these activities. So how did we develop? So I told you earlier, 10 projects, that was the commitment by 2030. And in fact, we have been following through our members, you know, where we stand with this discussion. And today we have 58 projects that were announced and that are actually on the tracker. The tracker is not a GCCA thing, it's actually something that we do with LeadIt. The MPP, ITA is also getting the information through that tracker. This is the source of it. And you see the geographic diversity and also the size of the thing. And with that, we have about 30 projects that are industrial scale. So I was here, say, we committed to 10. We are working currently on 30 that are officially announced. Now, what we are doing is also we made a survey. We made if I move, I'm gonna get the just for the photo. You don't want me on the photo? So we make a survey with a member and we say, okay, you have a number of projects that are official, but are you also working on projects, secrecy? I mean, a lot of things are related to NDAs, etc. And the survey we receive is that there is an additional 42 projects in the pipeline. 42 projects for 26 million tons. In total, the industry is working on 50 million tons of capacity of projects for a number of 100 projects, a little bit more than 100 projects in the pipeline. We started 3 years ago, and honestly, I can tell you, I was a fresh CEO at the time, and we struggled to define how many projects we're going to commit in 2030. I should probably not say that. But we said minimum we need to have 2-digit number. And now we have 50 projects 50 million tons in the pipeline, and already 30 official projects announced in the things. We may have uncertainty around this project, and it's true that there is a lot of things that needs to be done, developed, and worked out before this project actually gets bankable and that are being realized. But we see also the success rate that the industry has in the government-led program like the European Innovation Funds or through the IRA, and we see that there is really a strong interest to help us finance and develop this project. Now, how do we work typically? This is also a reference of the work we are doing in, let's say, not as regulated countries. And this is an example of India. On there, what we said is, we actually decided to lead the discussion on carbon capture. And we went to our members, and we have many members in India, and we said, listen, we need to lead the carbon capture discussion in India, and we need to start the discussion. Even if the Indian state saying that the objective is 2070, we need to appropriate ourselves. So we made a study to understand how can cement, contribute to the development of the CCUS landscape in India, to understand what strategy we would do, what partnership we would make, what geographies. And with that study, we were actually cooperating with a Global CCS Institute. You help finance that study, and we really identified the vision on India. And with that also come, what regulatory change should be done in India. How to actually, get this discussion on with the government on how to understand the business case, on how to get profitable on all the liabilities, on all the development around that. And we also identify 3 to 5 projects that would be going on, would be put forward as a test, not as a demonstration, industrial scale project, but in India to understand the economics. And in that we have received, or this discussion is ongoing, but we are discussing and we'll receive the support from the IFC, and the IFC will co-finance actually the development of the feasibility in the project. Of course, as part of the things, we have the responsibility to share the learning across the industry to make sure that we, get these things on the table. So we have 2 reports that are published. They are available. You can actually check it on the website. They are on our website. They are on the Global CCS Institute as well website. And these are really interesting work. And for me, this is an example of how the industry can actually move forward, making some statements and looking really into the detail on how it works. And that's important because our view is really strong on that. There is no transition if there is not profitable transition, right? So the whole discussion on financing, it's not necessarily a discussion of availability of finance. There are many people that are here ready to invest into projects, but you need to have a return on investment, right? You need to make sure that the projects are profitable, and only when you demonstrate that there is a profitability in a new business concept, in a new business line, then you will have people committing on going for the deep decarbonization movement. So we are following here a concept that is developed by UNIDO. It's called the chain reaction, right? And they have basically theorized how to mobilize finance at scale and how to make sure that an industry like ours is actually reaching the commitment in 2050 while through getting to profitability. And that's interesting because I think it's the first UN-driven on type of organization that talks about profitability and talks about the financing as a need to actually, with real industrial concerns on the development. So to get there, you need two things. You need three things. Once, you need to have a plan, right? So this is the roadmap, and that's all the work we do on roadmap with the countries. I mean, we are a long-term vision industry. If you don't have a roadmap, that means that you are not working on the thing. Second, you need to work on the enabling environment. And these are the regulatory things, right? These are the things we discussed earlier on how to change your environment, on how to make sure that your business model can exist, has space to breathe and to get return on investment. Second, you need to have projects. You need to demonstrate that your projects are viable and that the people that invest in the project are actually having on reaching the first mover advantage. That's fundamental. For that, we are cooperating in particular with the Multilateral Development Bank that help us to actually understand the feasibility studies, the business case, etc. within it, and come with, you know, a business model that then can be actually put forward and developed. And only then you will have the financing at scale, right? So these are some of the things we are doing. Now, I stop here. Paul, do I make the next introduction or you do it? You do it. If you know Catherine. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Thomas. That's fantastic. And without further ado, I'll introduce you to Catherine Romanak, who is professor of Texas, a research professor. She has tremendous experience and is a real expert in. She's a geochemist. Her day-to-day is all about driving innovation at the university, which is a really good hotbed for deep thought and monitoring geological storage of CO2 around the world. Catherine, please.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm so glad to be here today to talk to you about storage, because what I have noticed as I go around the world and talk to people about storage is that it's very difficult for most people to understand it, and it creates a lot of anxiety around CCS. And so let me take you on that journey pretty much that we started 25 years ago when we started to look at storage. How does it work? What happens when it goes down there? Will it stay down there? What if it comes up? So those are all the questions that we've been answering. And in fact, for 25 years, we've had our boots on the ground, handling CO2, injecting it subsurface, starting with 500 tons at a research site in Texas, scaling up to 1 million tons, and then looking at every single monitoring technology that we had and seeing how it worked. And then going to industrial scale deployment up to the largest project at its time, the Petronova project at 1.6 million tons per year. So we've been in the playground. And what I'm finding now is that there is so much misinformation swirling around about carbon capture and storage that it's very difficult for you to understand what is the information I can trust. And so that's why I'm here today, because it's difficult for me, having been working in this space for as long as I have, to hear this misinformation that's giving people doubts about the technology. And in fact, I see the doubts kind of in two different challenges. Technical issues. It's very difficult for most people to understand geology. How do you put CO2 deep in a rock? I mean, it's just hard to understand that. And so the geologic scales and the mechanisms that trap CO2 are very difficult for people to understand. And a confused mind says no, right? And so what I want to do here is talk a little bit more about that. But the other part is the socio-emotional issues, and which I call a Hollywood mentality of risk. It seems like a lot of people think that if a CCS project goes wrong, it's a huge explosion and it's the end of the world. And what we found out through 25 years of research is that's not the case at all. That it's very unlikely that CO2 will leak, and if it did by some chance leak, it would be a very, very small impact, a small and transient impact. So how does it work? Let's look at it a little deeper. Well, CO2 is injected via wells, very similar to oil and gas wells, and they're injected into strata that is very porous. And if I had a piece of that rock right here, and I gave you a dropper bottle of water, and I said, put a drop And by the way, I will have that at our booth number 27, in the upcoming days. You can come by and you can put a drop of water on that rock and you will see it suck right in. There's spaces in between the pores, and that's where the CO2 goes. And then above that is a layer that confines it, a layer that will not let CO2 go through it. And so we know that we have it securely in place. So that is what we call structural trapping. Then there's another part. So what we do is when we inject it in, the salty water that resides in the formation already is pushed aside. And then the CO2 goes in between the pores. It's not in a cave, it's in between the pores where it gets stuck. It gets stuck with something we call residual trapping. And it's very much like if you were going to, I have to say this, so I'll get some laughs, but if you were making a sandwich and you were putting mayonnaise on your bread, and then you decided, oh, I don't want mayonnaise, I'm gonna wipe it off. But if you try to scrape the mayonnaise off, it won't come off because it's stuck in the little holes of the bread. So that's very much what residual trapping is. And then eventually we get the CO2 dissolving into the water and turning into a mineral. So it's extremely permanent and safe. It's sticky down there. It likes to stay down there. And again, the permanence is exceptional. Thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. So we're not haphazard about this. Regulations exist for CO2 storage, and it's safe by design. We have a protocol that we have to go through in order to get these sites commissioned. You need a high level of certainty to get a permit. We do the site selection and characterization, and then we do a risk assessment using modeling to identify any potential unwanted outcomes. And then we design the project to further minimize the risk, and then we monitor it. And we monitor it all the way through the stratigraphy, from the deep subsurface all the way to the environment, to make sure that the CO2 is staying where we wanted it to go, and that there's no unwanted outcomes to the environment. So what the science says about CCS is that it's safe. The regulations and the methodologies have been existing for years. It's a large-scale permanent emissions reductions. Yes, we can put CO2 into products, and that's an important thing to do, but the volumes of CO2 that can be stored are significant in order to attack the problem that we have right now of getting CO2 out of the atmosphere. It's not new. It's being done now. We have some 50 projects storing 50 million tons a year. And we know what the risks would be, and they're minimal, and we can manage them. To date, there's been no impacts to the environment. There's been no reversal of storage at any of these projects. And we know also that cement simply cannot reach net zero without CCS. So if I was going to talk about accelerating deployment, which I think the conversation is going to go towards, I would say that, first of all, absolutely, we have got to enhance the understanding of CO2 storage. This is critical to help people understand what it is. We have to have governments assessing their storage resources and developing roadmaps, exactly what Tomas said. That's exactly what needs to happen all over the world. And we need funding for technology transfer between countries that are doing it and countries that want to learn how to do it. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Catherine. So we've heard that there's a commitment, there's an acceleration in the development. We've heard that the technology works, that it's safe, and we've also got myself a little bit hungry with talk of the sandwich. But where is it working? What are the good examples? What are the good case studies around the world? So it's my great pleasure to introduce the Honourable Rebecca Schultz, who is the Minister of Environment and Protected Areas for the Government of Alberta in Canada. Before that, she was also Minister for Municipal Affairs and Children's Services. She's a communications professional and brings that rigor to her approach for really driving common sense, practical policies that will really develop the economy of Alberta, drive innovation and investment for Alberta. So let's hear what's going on there. Minister Schultz.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you so much. And Catherine, as someone who was formerly a communications person who spent time working with geologists and trying to turn, and engineers, I would say, and turn their language into simple language that everyday people can understand, it is always a pleasure to listen to you talk about the safety and efficacy of CCUS in a way that really resonates with people and makes them a little bit hungry. And so, you know, I do want to say this, that we are in Alberta often known for our energy and our leadership in oil and gas production. But I would also say that we're very, very proud of our leadership when it comes to CCUS. We have supported the development of carbon capture and storage for more than a decade in Alberta. We've invested over $1.9 billion in this technology in our province, and now we have seen more than 14 million tons, of course, and counting, of CO2 safely and permanently stored underground. This is a huge success story for us. I would say it's not just government policy alone that has allowed us to be leaders in this area. It's also the geology that we have, as well as, of course, our highly skilled workforce, which does come from our expertise in the energy industry. But I would also say it's our business-friendly climate and willingness to work with industry to ensure that we can keep industry competitive and really improve the economics of these projects. Projects like these do not happen overnight. They take time, they take money. A significant capital investment is the biggest hurdle, oftentimes, that these investments have to overcome. I do see that government has a role in helping to de-risk these technologies so that we can see these projects come to their final investment decisions. So just last year in the province of Alberta, in addition to the work that we've already done when it comes to carbon capture and storage, we did launch a new carbon capture incentive program to help more projects get approved and built in the province of Alberta. So this will allow us to provide major industries with up to 12% of new eligible capital project costs, should provide up to $5 billion in support, leveraging up to $35 billion in total investment. So this will, of course, help businesses in multiple industries. Of course, I think oftentimes when people think Alberta, they do, of course, think oil and gas, but also power generation, hydrogen, petrochemicals, manufacturing. And we do have some exciting work that's being done. Obviously, Heidelberg is one of those very exciting projects that we have been working with them over the last number of years to hopefully see their net zero cement plant launch. And so their facility is scheduled to be operational by late 2026, which is very exciting for those of us in Alberta. Federal incentives are also, I think, at play, and they're a key part for us to have both our federal government and our provincial governments spurring those investments on. The federal investments are up to 60% for clean technology projects. That does include hydrogen and CCUS, but then the 12% that's offered by the province of Alberta, I think, is key as well. We were also, you know, I just like to tout Alberta's environmental record as well. We were one of the first jurisdictions, we were the first jurisdiction in North America to introduce an industrial carbon pricing system. That levy had really allowed us to then reinvest those industry dollars, as opposed to public dollars, into the support of these types of projects. And that's why we've been able to see the success that we've seen so far when it comes to carbon capture, utilization, and storage. So through our TIER program, Technology, Innovation, and Emissions Reduction, we're able to take those industry dollars, reinvest them into technology, help de-risk some of those investments for industry, and then, of course, helping us meet our emissions reduction goals while continuing to be a strong energy provider to provide the safe, reliable, secure energy that people are looking for. So Heidelberg is just one example of a project that we in Alberta are very, very excited about, but it really follows our path of working with industry to see how we can make sure that there is a favorable climate for industry to make those final investment decisions in the province of Alberta.
So, fantastic. Can you still hear me? Yeah, that's all the presentations. We're now going to actually move over to a panel and some questions. So have that thought. Panel, I invite up Winston Beck, who has joined us from Heidelberg Materials. He heads up government. There. He leads government affairs for Heidelberg Materials, really driving government policy, campaigning, working with a range of different international organizations NGOs and associations. As well as, I also want to invite up Dr. Chana Pumi, who is the chairman of the Thai Cement Manufacturers Association, but is also the Chief Sustainability Officer for SCG, one of the biggest companies in Thailand. And it's a great pleasure that we collaborate with SCG and the TCMA over the course of our time. So that's our panel. My first question, though, of course, goes to the minister in Alberta. For such a relatively small subnational area, how have you been able to make such big progress, really punching above your weight and advancing CCUS? And for that, I'm handing a special panel microphone over to the minister.
Well, I did not know the first question was coming to me, but I sure do appreciate that. Again, I think it comes down to our tier system. So the Technology Innovation and Emissions Reduction Fund, which we implemented I call it an industrial levy on emissions, which was introduced in 2007. And so those dollars we then committed to reinvest into technology. And so this really did allow us to de-risk some of these projects, especially when there is a significant amount of risk. We know that I do think one of the biggest barriers probably to CCUS is the economics of these projects. And I do think that we as government have a role in helping to de-risk that. But I think especially as cost of living and economic concerns are certainly facing just regular everyday Canadians right across our country, I think it shows a lot of confidence in our industry that these are industry dollars that are then being reinvested into these new technologies. And so I think it was those early investments, obviously working with industry to ensure that there is space for sequestration and that there's certainty around the regulatory piece. I think that, Catherine had mentioned in her comments. And so we really wanted to make sure that there was regulatory certainty, funding to help de-risk the technology and those initial investments for industry, and then proving out that it works. And so I think that has been a key piece when we can now proudly say that we have, when I started in this role, it was 12 million tons of CO2 safely and permanently stored underground. Now we're up to 14 and counting. So it is pretty exciting. It's interesting to see those projects. It does also help to then have something to communicate people about the safety piece, because unfortunately I think one of the things that we've seen, maybe not just in North America, but certainly we've seen it in North America, is the misinformation. And I think it's concerns of folks that, well, I'll be frank, some in the NGO community that want to see fossil fuels and energy development shut down. And so there's been some misinformation about the safety and efficacy of technologies like CCUS, which is now something that I think politicians and companies are all working to combat. And so we're trying to do our part in communicating with the people that we serve about what we have seen, how this works, trying to communicate that in a very simple, clear way, which is why I so admire Catherine for her story about the mayonnaise. But it does make it real for people and helps them understand that this is safe, it is proven, it is permanent, the risks are relatively low. And so that's, I think, an emerging concern that we have just with some of the opposition from the NGO community, which is really, I think it's unfortunate, because I think what we all want to see is reducing emissions, but still meeting the energy and supply demands that people have. And when we're talking about cement, I mean, for those of us in Alberta, we have a growing province, we have growing industrial economies. We need these products. We need cement. And I think it's amazing that it was actually industry and individual companies like Heidelberg, and we've talked to others as well, who it's their own initiative that want to see these projects happen, and they're excited about it. So our role is really to support them through that regulatory and funding certainty piece. But I think increasingly so, having conversations with just regular everyday people in the communities that you serve about what this actually looks like is more and more important all the time.
Fantastic, Minister. Cement is needed, I heard you say.
Absolutely it is.
So that's from a sort of government perspective in terms of driving it forward. What about at a company perspective? So I'm going to ask Winston just to sort of elaborate what's going on at Heidelberg Materials.
Yes, thank you very much, and also thanks to the GCCA and GCCSI for organizing this this panel. I think Minister Schulz has more or less already said it all, but at least you touched upon all the relevant points. But maybe from our perspective, so Heidelberg Materials, for those who don't know us in detail, we are one of the biggest construction material companies in the world, and we are working on all the various decarbonization levers, which were presented here in the roadmap. But of course, CCUS is absolutely critical in order to get us to net zero, and it's actually the only technology to date which will enable us to produce net zero cement. And for that reason, we have started the journey very early on. I think within the company, a long time before I entered, we have discussed already CCUS. It started with a discussion in Norway in 2004. And by now we have announced that we are working on 12 large-scale CCUS projects in Europe and Northern America. We will actually launch the first CCS plant in the cement world by spring next year. It will reach mechanical completion by the end of this year. So we have already something to celebrate, and then we will launch its operation early Q2 in 2025. And that will then also be the very first time that we can bring net zero carbon captured cement to the market. And we actually have launched this product last year at COP28, and we are now already in discussions with our customers and have the order book open. So that is also a very exciting experience and knowledge curve we are doing right now, because one of the points which was not yet really mentioned, but which is absolutely key, and we can go into detail about that, is creating the demand for the green products as well. But when it comes to the CCS projects as such, I fully agree that this is still very much pioneering work. And what we really need to work on is creating certainty for the project and creating the business case. And for that, it's also very clear that in the early breakthrough period, so I'm talking about the next 10 to 15 years, that we definitely also need the support from international organizations and governments like the Canadian and Alberta one. And Alberta, I think I really need to applaud what everything you have done. I mean, I think you introduced carbon pricing in 2007. You have introduced a carbon management strategy last year. And especially, of course, also the Alberta carbon capture incentive scheme is absolutely critical to get us to this business case I was talking about. Besides that, I think the panel is about international cooperation, right? Of course, we also need to discuss that in global panels and conferences like COP29, because there's a steep learning curve we need to do and can do from projects like the one we are having in Norway to other countries where now CCS is also being introduced. What we are looking at is, first of all, we talked about already the incentive schemes, so having carbon pricing schemes in place, but also having funding. The second part, which is very important, is of course the availability of the transport infrastructure and the storage. And the third one I just mentioned is demand. I think we see some very positive news over the last few years. The Carbon Management Challenge was launched. I think 20 countries are now supporting it. We see CCUS strategies developing in certain regions. Canada, I mentioned. In Europe, they have also introduced now an industrial carbon management strategy with actually the binding target of 50 million tons CO2 injection capacity by 2030, which is also pretty ambitious and will certainly help some of the projects in Europe to reach the next stage. And then we also see countries actually cooperating more and more, and we have seen bilateral agreements between, especially around the North Sea area, between Norway and Sweden, with Netherlands, France, Denmark, and Germany popping up, and that is of course very critical and helps us to also de-risk the whole value chain, because I think what is important to understand that we are used to work as cement with our plants, and with our customers. What we are not used is to work with a CO2 transport company, to work with a storage operator. So these are very complex new value chains which we are just now developing. So we need all support to de-risk throughout the process.
Lots of threads there, Winston, and thank you. Great work that's going on at Heidelberg Materials. But I also see many of our colleagues and our member companies that are also advancing CCUS, Wholesome, CRH, Cemex, and Mullins here, and they can all talk about the work that they're doing. We've touched on the global north to some degree and international collaboration, but it's also really key that we drive forward in the global south. And of course, we have Chana Pumi, who I want to sort of pick up on that question, just to talk about some of the work that you're doing there in terms of both sustainability and CCUS.
I agree that without CCS, maybe cement industry cannot be net zero. I also ever visit Breivik plant that congratulate to you next year you operate. This what Thailand trying to learn is how we can get the total value chain of the carbon capture, utilization and storage. In our case, Thailand, we don't have the whole chain connection. Therefore, we start with carbon capture and utilize. That we have plenty of the renewable energy that can do the hydrogen combined with the carbon that we capture from the cement process to get the methane and inject back to the kiln. However, for the storage itself, we have offshore storage. It's quite far from the Saraburi province that 80% of the cement plant is over there. Today is lucky, very lucky that I met Professor Kathleen, that I have a project study in the Saraburi geology to store onshore that work with the GCCA and also collaborate with UNIDO, make the framework of the whole carbon capture, utilization and storage in Thailand. And what I'm also learned from Japan. Japan also just start follow EU to test the carbon capture in the many technology, not only amine based. I also collaborate with the Thai Heyo, my friend in Japan, to see how we can leverage sending our example, the sample of the syngas in our process, to see which kind of technology that can leverage from Japan or even in EU to Thailand. And we also need the green financing and funding from outside Thailand to see how we can expedite the project in Thailand. We just start 2 years ago, study and also trying to get the carbon capture pilot project in demonstration plant in Thailand, and followed by how we can see the one who can support like study storage onshore. In the last year, I also get the Princeton University support in Saraburi Sandbox, study on how much the renewable energy can produce in the Saraburi area. It's found that it's plenty of the solar energy can be produced there. So we hope that the next step for the carbon capture and storage will support from a global network that progress of the Thailand.
Well, thank you, Chana. That's maybe then the next question is around indeed sort of global collaboration. Often development is at a national level, but I'll ask Jared, how can international collaboration really accelerate all of this work, especially around the business case, especially around storage? Anyway.
Yeah, so we'll see if we can do this again. All right. One more time. So I think as we heard, right, there are important roles for all aspects of society to play. There's a number of mechanisms where governments can collaborate and learn from each other in terms of what are the most efficient and effective policies that can support all forms of climate change mitigation, and specifically what can support carbon capture and storage deployment. public procurement as one example, infrastructure investment like we have in Alberta with the Alberta Carbon Trunk Line as another example. And there's, again, a number of mechanisms where governments already collaborate. There's mechanisms like the GCCA where countries can learn from each other, share information on processes, right, to accelerate the progress of deployment. But it all comes back down to that business case. There's a number of mechanisms that are out there, global north to global south. How can we work with the development banks to help move the needle and accelerate that progress in the global south and in developing countries? One of the key aspects that we've heard, right, is not just the time constant that it takes to do the capture and build the equipment at the plant, but the development of the CO2 transport and storage networks that are required to store CO2 durably, as Dr. Robenak said, away from contributing to climate change. That takes time. There is much collaboration and good that can occur. There are studies that are being done by the industry in collaboration with government to map out where are the most amenable storage opportunities, what, from a systems perspective, are the best ways to connect those dots, to get economy of scale to connect multiple point sources with shared common infrastructure that can help de-risk the overall system and lower the overall per unit cost. So there's a variety of things that need to be done, and there's a number of mechanisms where government and industry are working together to do that.
Thanks so much. And Thomas, do you want to pick up on that, the sort of international collaboration element, especially global north to global south, and driving the business case, which is needed, which a few people have spoken about. Thomas.
No, yeah, absolutely. I was myself in Breivik not so long ago, so congratulations. It's really impressive. But I'm saying that as an example because I was there with actually a delegation from CEOs from Latin America. And we have organized this trip to actually show them that it is a reality. In the cement industry, we are very pragmatic. It's at the end of the day, the industry is about physical thing. You need to, and sometimes you need to see the things tangible and say, wow, it's there, right? And with that, you actually enter into the discussion of what's to be learned. I think the role on the cooperation that we have in GCCA is it goes on different level. For sure, we are here to actually work with you guys and do the best on transfer, on share the knowledge, share the you said the passion, but the energy on the will to demonstrate and to show that this is possible, and make people realize that this is just across the door, and that's really totally feasible. So we have actually different working groups. One of them is about really the technology. There, I was saying initially the innovation. So on innovation, we are cooperating with a global research network. So we have 450 scientists, 80 PhDs working on different topics on decarbonization. And one of them is, of course, carbon capture, use and store. That gives a lot of knowledge sharing opportunities. So it's not only about research, it's also about the information that comes out of the research that can be shared, and having the right people. That's how you build bridges, right? Exactly. We also work with startups. So we have every year the Open Challenge, where we actually invite different startups. Usually we have between 100 and 150 startups that respond to our call, talking about innovation solutions for the industry. And our role there is really about accelerating the technology, so making sure that the technology moves from a tier 2, 3 up to something like 7, 8, so that it can be implemented by the industry, tested by the industry. And we have already 10 consortium working on specific startups. On 6 of them are actually related to capture or store or use. That's one of the important things. We have also cooperation with startup in an entrepreneur network where smaller startup or other type of startup can also cooperate with the industry. Now, the other thing we are doing is on the business itself. From there, we have a role in trying to translate and apprehend all the discussion around the carbon credits, the carbon certificate. And that's an area which is also important, and particularly in the relation north-south. One of the discussions we have with the people from, yesterday I was in a panel with someone complaining about the word global south, so developing country, let's put it like this, was that the guys say, on it's very trivial, huh? They say, look guys, you from the north, it's your CO2. And you want us to pay for it, right? I mean, I'm not talking about the traditional measures which are implementable in the actual business context, etc. But you basically want us to pay for that. And that's expensive. And why my nation would develop on, I'm not saying it's right, I'm not judging the argument. But fundamentally, there is a notion of who's going to pay for that, right? So is it possible, and who's going to pay for that? And when you discuss about the relation on South, when you discuss in India, when you discuss in Africa, when you discuss in Latin America, there is a moment where the government, where the people say, okay, fine, but who's going to pay? And there we have to actually understand, apprehend again, make proposition on how we can use the international carbon market, and that's the purpose of that with the the different level of credits to actually make it work. So that's one of the missions that we have also with GCCA in helping the business case to actually crystallize and to make it happen. And so important to have a roadmap, to have projects, to have legislation, and then to make the business case possible through these modern and innovative systems from north to south. But by the way, it's also valid in US. I mean, in US, they don't have a carbon legislation. And today they have the tax windfall with the 45Q. I mean, we don't know how this is going to evolve. So, I mean, they might need also one of these market mechanisms to get a cost for the CO2 down the road.
Thanks, Thomas. I'll turn to the audience to see if there's one or two questions that they might have. I see two hands very, very quickly go up. If you quickly say your name, it's a question rather than a big statement, and please direct it to somebody. Okay, thank you. Just for the purposes of time.
People do that, I know. Thank you so much. So my name is Osama. I'm from Pakistan. And naturally, my question is what the conversation moved towards. How do we resolve the issue of scalability and finance when it comes to the global south? Because hundreds of millions of homes need to be built there. And the energy demand is also supposed to come from global south. So how do we resolve this dilemma and conundrum? Thank you.
Great. Who wants to pick that up? Does anybody want to? Catherine, you go first. Yeah. Take the microphone.
Okay. Well, one of the places is the Green Climate Fund. We're here at the COP, and the Green Climate Fund is meant to fund mitigation and adaptation in developing countries. One of the problems we've had is that, again, many of the people that even sit on the board of the Green Climate Fund don't understand CCS, and so there's been a lack of funding from the Green Climate Fund for CCS, even though it is in their instruments that it says we will fund carbon capture and storage. So one of the efforts that the University of Texas is doing with the IEA GHG is trying to open that fund up to fund CCS in countries. We have other multilateral banks as well that can pitch in as well, and we have had the World Bank with a CCS trust fund that is now finished, but they're hoping to renew that. And so those are just some places that we can go to try to get the funds to start developing CCS in various countries.
Fantastic. Winston, very quickly, quick answer, if that's possible. I want to get one more question from the floor.
Yeah, no, I think what is important, what I mentioned before, is it really creating demand and also demand for low carbon net zero products in these markets. And for that, I think it's important from an international level to really define what do we mean actually is low carbon for cement and concrete. And there's tangible work ongoing in the IEA, in UNIDO, and I hope there will be some news around that rather soon. And the second point is on the financing. I think funding is absolutely key, and if we can find international organizations to support that is good. But we also need to work on more innovative funding, financing schemes. And one of them is a good agreement. I think the agreement now at the UN level on the Article 6.4, where it could be possible to find projects in the south, even if there is no demand yet, through that, then creating demand somewhere else and moving the credits instead of the product, which would also save transport emissions. So I think we need to be very creative in the way how we approach these challenges.
Thanks, Winston. Just one more question from the floor, and then do try and sort of wrap that into the same answer as well, Thomas. It's got to be the last one, very quickly.
Thank you, Paul. Cédric Demeus from Holcim. I'm not going to repeat what Winston said, because I would have said exactly the same thing, except that we really know that your project is more advanced in Alberta than ours. But anyway, that's another matter. Minister Schulz, I would like to come back to a subject you've raised, which is social acceptance. You know, our CCUS teams are nerds and engineers, and usually that has come in our experience in the project development a little bit at the back end of the thinking, and we need to collaborate closely on this social acceptance because it's a license to operate these projects, and we will operate them for the next 30, 40 years. So any tips on how we can collaborate closely with you and whether you are having a specific approach in Alberta to deal with that? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, when we think about the opposition from some of these NGO communities and organizations, I just don't believe that social license is a real thing. And I think that that's where we've seen the conversation shift from an opposition to fossil fuel development and production to now, I mean, I was talking to a state legislator in the United States who said, you know, I'm really surprised now that all of a sudden there's misinformation being shared in these communities. My response was, like, this surprises you? It shouldn't surprise you because it actually wasn't about it wasn't about emissions, I think, for some of those groups. It's really about an attack on certain industries of one kind or another. But now it is targeted. And we've seen that shift, I mean, relatively recently for us, that for a long time we talked so positively about our record when it comes to CCUS in Alberta and the great work that we've done and how we've safely and it just rolls off the tongue. We've safely and permanently stored 14 million tons of CO2. But now you can see pockets of concern popping up in certain communities, and it's largely around newer developments, newer projects. And so I think, I mean, we just talked about this yesterday, actually, in our meeting, is how do we leverage, whether it is communications tools or messaging or something as simple as infographics and research in I would say ways that are publicly palatable and consumable, which I think speaks to what you've said about making it simple and relevant to just real people who then hear something like, hey, wait, do I want this in my backyard? Well, you've had it in your backyard for decades, and it's been safe and effective. And so I think that there is a role certainly for government to play, but I know even within the communities, whether it be in oil and gas or whether that be in cement and some of the work that Heidelberg has been doing in Alberta, I know that they've been putting a significant amount of effort into community outreach and talking to people in town halls and direct communication to explain how these projects are going to work, how the technology works, and how they can have confidence in these projects moving forward. But I think we've really seen that opposition and misinformation ramp up, especially over, I would even say, the last year. It's been a significant shift. And so I would say, you know, don't leave it all to the politicians. We only have so much we only have so much credibility. But no, I'm just joking there. But I think we all have a role to play in sharing that message in the communities we serve because, to your point, we want to do the right thing for the environment, but you know, to think that we can live our lives without cement, oil, and gas, I mean, that's just wildly unrealistic.
Thank you, Minister. We have to close, unfortunately. If only we had 2 hours. This topic will be continued throughout COP, certainly on our pavilion as well. Let me take the opportunity to say that many of our members are here. We can continue the conversation. Thanks so much to everybody for joining online, for coming today as well, physically, but also to our excellent panelists, if you could say a round of applause and a thank you to them. Can I also thank the Global CCS Institute and the Clean Air Task Force for supporting this event. All our events are online. You can follow them, pick up a program. Our next event today is at 4:30, where we are launching our Action and Progress report and officially launching this pavilion. Please join us if you can for a reception then. Thanks again.